Okay, here we go. Everybody ready? All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It is May 14th, 2026, 7:30 in the morning. And this is the meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority for this particular date. And we've got a interesting agenda, not a long agenda, but an interesting agenda in front of us this morning. First of all, we're doing these meetings just like we are with city council meetings on a hybrid basis. And so folks may be listening in and watching the meeting, and there's your call-in information. There's no public hearing this morning, so there's only one opportunity to call in. If you have a concern or a comment you want to make, you can call in during the community comment portion of the agenda, which comes up fairly fast. And keep in mind that you cannot comment on something that's otherwise on the agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing in front of the HRA. And so we'll first entertain comments from folks in the audience. We got a few with us today. And then we'll call on anybody that's tuning in virtually if there is anyone to call on. So having provided that information, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And somebody's going to call the roll. I guess our executive director is going to call the roll.
Yes, sir, I will do that. Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce. Here. Commissioner Agnew.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Yeah, we got a full house this morning, which is unusual with everybody's work schedules, which is nice to have everybody here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have had published, of course, a meeting agenda for the benefit of the public, so they know what kind of work we're engaged in, and also for ourselves. And is there any change to the meeting agenda by staff or commissioners?
There is not.
Okay, all right. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved. A second.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Agnew seconds the adoption of the meeting agenda. Anything further on that? Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the meeting agenda as published, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. The meeting agenda is adopted. We will now work from that agenda further. We're now at community comment. So is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and comment to the HRA on a matter that's not scheduled for a future public hearing or on the agenda? Please feel free to come forward. Okay, seeing no one coming forward, do we have anybody online?
We do not have any callers currently, but I do recommend waiting 1 minute before we proceed.
So we'll wait for you to get back to us.
It's been a minute and we still have no callers.
All right, thank you. Let's move on then and ask our executive director if he had any comment from the prior meeting that he needed to cover.
There were no questions or comments to address.
Very good. Let's move on to the consent portion of the agenda. There's 2 items on the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the HRA that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right, hearing nothing, is there a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda?
So moved. A second.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Agnew seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Anything further there from a discussion standpoint? All those in favor of adopting the items on the consent agenda on a single motion basis, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those items are adopted. And then we will move on to the kind of the heart of the meeting this morning, which is the reports and recommendations portion of the meeting. And I think our Economic Development Director, Bill Nuendorf, wants a little guidance on an issue that he's been working on. which is potential spark funding for 4925 Eden Avenue, and that is where the restaurant Starling is located, which is owned by Juster Concepts. Now we'll turn now to our Economic Development Manager, Bill Neuendorf. Mr. Neuendorf, good morning. Welcome.
Yes, good morning. That's a great overview. So this morning I have two presentations for you. Our first is focusing on a potential use of our Spark program to support the job expansion at a local restaurant, the Starling Restaurant, just across the corner from City Hall at 4925 Eden. So as you mentioned, this particular topic is just for discussion this morning. No action is required, but I've been in contact with the owner since they were working on their construction plans, as they were looking to really revive and add some zest to that corner. And we've been chatting on and off over the years about their performance on site, some of the challenges, and then some of the recurring challenges that they're seeing. So this morning, we'd really appreciate some guidance on whether or not the HRA would be interested in intervening to support some improvements on the site. This is kind of part one of this proposal. In order to address some of their parking concerns, they would need two things: some funding support and a site plan amendment. So before we go through the Planning Commission process and submit full engineering drawings and all that type of thing, we wanted to visit with the HRA first to see if this is something that we're even interested in pursuing. So again, not looking for a final answer, but looking for your direction. Ultimately, the question that the owner and myself have is whether or not this is something we spend time working on or not. So your input is critical to that.
All right, and I would note that Mr. Frederick, the owner of Juster Concepts, is here with us this morning as well to be available for questioning and answering.
Correct.
Thanks for being here this morning.
So the site, it's a 2-acre site just across the corner from City Hall. In 2021, the site was purchased. This is where the Perkins restaurant had been for many, many years. But that site was redeveloped into the Mason Green Apartments with the restaurant on the main floor. That restaurant was inserted into the overall project plan based on urgings from the Planning Commission and City Council at that time. When the developer first brought the proposal to the city, there was not a retail use. But through the public process, through the site plan entitlement process, the city really urged them to include some type of active commercial use. And Mr. Frederick responded by putting his restaurant in the building. The project is predominantly occupied by the apartment complex, but there is the restaurant on the west side of the building, and they do have a small surface parking lot. 28 stalls in the lot. It does satisfy our minimum code requirements. That's how we got to this point. But what the owner has found over time is that based on the unique customer mix that he's attracting, that parking lot can get overwhelmed and filled up very quickly. And while it satisfies our minimum code requirements, it really doesn't meet the market. So over the last year and a half that he's been open, he's looked into many different options, on-street parking, valet parking. He's been in touch with neighboring property owners to see if he can lease space from them. But none of those options seem to be viable. And thus we're left here this morning to discuss an option where the HRA might get involved. And ultimately, it's about expanding that on-site parking lot. So I'll show a picture in a second. I'll try to show a picture.
Seems to me that they've had challenges unlike many other businesses in the area too, because they've been through one road construction project and now the bridge project, and so it's affected people's maybe desire to travel in the area and then go to a restaurant on top of it.
Construction certainly discourages consumers from coming to those sites. So this is the site plan that was approved back in 2022, 2023, in that time frame. It shows the footprint of the apartment building. There's the circular driveway that is the main door for the apartments on the right side. Eden Avenue is to the north on the top of the image, and then Wilson Road on the right or the east. On the left-hand side of this image is Highway 100. And you'll see the gray area is the surface parking lot that exists today. Just beyond the surface parking lot is a landscape buffer. And that landscape buffer was important to the city for two reasons. One, it's a place to put trees and some landscaping. But through the entitlement process, the city also has an option to purchase that land if we need it for a public road or similar public improvement at some point in the future. As we stand here in 2026, there's no imminent need for us to have that road. With the new bridge improvement, we think this type of road is a long, distant future possibility, but we do have the option. But while the site is not being used by the city, as the owner and I were chatting, we thought, well, that could be the spot where we put the surface parking. Let's see. Yeah, I think this one is dead. So the restaurant owner had this rough sketch prepared to illustrate how additional surface parking could look on the site. Let me note, this is very rough. It's wrong. There's details that need to be refined. There's some grade that we didn't realize. There's a utility post in the wrong way that would be too expensive to move. But for the purposes of our conversation this morning, it's a good place to start. So the changes to the site plan would be on the westerly edge of the property, where that landscaping area is. We could expand the parking there, nearly doubling the on-site parking. So it's not just adding 4 or 5 stalls, it's nearly doubling it. So it's a game changer for the consumers that want to go there. If this were easy, it would have happened already, right? I usually bring things to you when they're hard, challenging, difficult, and expensive. So this is one of the toughest edges of the property. There's a reason that the landscaping was there. There's the large retaining wall that's owned by MnDOT. There's a steep slope, and there's stormwater. So in order to extend the parking, we have to modify the retaining wall, not the one owned by MnDOT, thank you, but the one that supports the rest of the existing parking lot. We have to modify the landscaping, which gets expensive. And then we have to also modify the stormwater system that's on site. So altogether, it comes in at about $750,000. That's a pretty massive expense for a parking lot. But looking at the other alternative options, it's also the least expensive option that's out there. So in generally, that's the type of improvement we're looking at. As Mr. Frederick and I have looked at this issue over the year or two, we have a possible strategy to consider, and we would utilize those spark funds that the city has available for improvements that create jobs. That's exactly what this is. Other projects we've done, elevators and exterior improvements and ADA improvements. This is permanent improvements to the site that would allow the owner to expand his restaurant offerings and create new employment jobs there. But as we've structured this, we've had all parties having a stake in this endeavor. So the business owner would be responsible for doing the engineering, hiring the contractor, getting all the permits, going through that entitlement process through Planning Commission, and then as a city council as well. That would be all on their plate. And they'd also be responsible for a portion of the expenses. I've approximated that at about $200,000. The property owner would also have a stake in this. Ultimately, they're the owner that holds the lease. Technically, they own the property. After many months of negotiation, they are willing to get involved in seeing this happen. So I penciled them in at about $200,000. Then I've also looked at what we've done for a few other restaurants in Edina, where we've supported them with forgivable loans in the range of $200,000 to support improvements to the site. So I'm kind of replicating what we've done there. And then I've looked at what we can do and what we've done in another case where we can use these spark funds as a traditional loan. So rather than going to a bank and paying prime interest, the HRA can use some of these funds, structure it as a repayable mortgage loan on the property that would be returned to the city over time. So we've structured that where the loan would be repaid over the remaining term of the lease. So that blends in nicely. Again, I'm approximating that at about $200,000. So all in, these are very rough numbers, right? We've got a lot of work to do, a lot of refining. We hope we can still find some value engineering in those construction costs. There's still work to do on the owner side with the financing, the property owner, the business owner. But before they get too far along, before they start spending real money and real time to submit engineering plans, we wanted to put this in front of you to see if there's something that you are interested in. I had mentioned this regulatory step, the entitlement process. That is one of the critical steps. I don't want to overlook that. We haven't explored that a whole lot. For certain, the owner would have to amend the site plan. They would use the city's typical process of public hearings and public meetings, public notices. It would go before city staff for engineering and landscaping. It would go towards the other government agencies for stormwater and other types of permits through the Planning Commission and City Council. Both the regulatory approvals and the financial approvals are essential. So if one doesn't pass muster, like if the regulatory aspect doesn't pass muster, financing doesn't matter. They need both to move forward. So I just wanted to put that on the table this morning. So the Planning Commission will get a chance, City Council will get a chance, but we thought we'd start here because without a path for funding, frankly, none of that matters. So in conclusion, I want to put the table or the question back on you and ask whether or not the HRA is generally supportive of using Spark in this type of manner, a two-part loan. One is forgivable and one is a traditional loan to be repaid. Looking at your general level of support, concern, suggestions, or opposition. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions. Mr. Frederick is here this morning. He's happy to answer any question, and I turn it back to you for discussion.
Yeah, before we start the discussion there, just a quick reminder, others maybe remember, but it's, on the Spark program itself, are those funds that need to be used by the end of this year?
Correct. Yeah,
allocated?
That Spark program has a deadline, so the work must be finished, projects must be paid and delivered by the end of the year. So we're at the point where we really can't delay much longer. We've spent over a year, as Mr. Frederick has tried to negotiate with the neighbors, tried the valet to see if that worked. He's tried lots of options. We're now at a point where he needs to make a decision. But yes, those Spark funds are limited, and the end of this year is our deadline.
So it's not an allocation or a designation of the funds. We've actually got to be expended. I mean, the project has to be finished and the money has to be
correct
paid out by the end of the year. And so how much is left in that Spark fund? And we know you've been thinking about how to effectively use it.
Sure.
In the appropriate manner. So
we have a bit over $1 million available in that fund.
okay. And tell us then again, remind us what happens with the remaining amounts in that fund at the end of the 12-month period here, at the end of December 31, unspent monies, where do they go?
Sure. Well, the monies began their life as tax increment. So they were property taxes collected in other areas of Edina, other commercial areas of Edina, Greater Southdale, Pentagon Park, and Wooddale Valley View. Those were the original sources of that. So any unused monies would be returned to those funds, most likely the Pentagon Park TIF district and the now expired Southdale TIF district. And they would live in those funds to pay off any obligations that remain.
Okay. And the $200,000 loan that we would potentially make, is that coming out of one particular TIF district that would go back to eventually? Because that'll be somewhere down the road, that'll be paid off.
Right. We haven't gone that far into the detail, but
okay.
I would, just off the top of my head, I would presume that we would use Spark funds that originated from Pentagon Park. And then over the next 10 or 12 years that's in the lease, we would return those payments back to that TIF district.
And have you got any other projects in mind that can be accomplished by the end of the year using Spark funds?
I have a
beyond
few
that?
other small ones, some of those streamlined programs for the small business. I'm working on a handful of those, but I don't have anything else in the six-figure category. Those smaller grants they max out at $24,000. So the only other large project that we have in mind is Enclave's work at the Macy's, the former Macy's furniture site. But at this point in time, remember, they have to have the work done and have the contractor paid. As we stand here in May, they haven't begun their demolition. It's coming, but they're not there. So I don't know if that project is realistic for Spark funding in 2026.
Okay, and then one more reminder, then I'm going to go to my colleagues, but we did some work down at 50th in France with, was it Cafe Americana? Is that what it's going to be called?
Correct.
Old Barrio?
Yep.
We did something similar to this down there.
We've done that twice at 50th. We supported that underground kind of speakeasy restaurant,
Yeah.
Noma.
That's going great, I guess.
Provided about $200,000 to them to add an elevator to actually access that lower level. And then separate project, we will provide about $200,000 to Americana for the same purpose. They're expanding on the second floor. To get a one-story elevator into an existing building is unreasonably expensive, so we're helping them with that elevator as well. So those are the other two kind of similar projects.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Commissioner Agnew. She's been waiting to ask a few
Thank you.
things.
So when you were talking about how some of the land, we today have the rights to use it, but we haven't done that, you said we would retain the rights, so if down the road there's a project that necessitates us having that space, we could take it back? Is that correct?
That is correct. One of my goals for you is to get as many options available to the city that are always available to you. So through the whole entitlement process and the financing project for the Mason Green, the city has public parking rights to the parking lot that's there in the event where under two conditions, if Tupa Park needs overflow parking, which they do from time to time, and if the restaurant is not using the parking lot. So the restaurant is not open 24 hours a day. They focus on primarily lunch and dinner. But in the mornings, we do have public access rights to the lot. And for the option to build an off-ramp or other public roadway, that's a permanent right that will not extinguish.
Okay, thank you. And if you could go back to the drawing, the imagery of that site directly, is the new lot a different level, or is it one flat lot?
To be determined in detail, it would be approximately flat. You would enter the lot in a single driveway, drive to the end and do a U-turn and come back. So it would be a looping lot.
Okay.
It's probably going to be sloped a little bit, but it'll, to the naked eye, it probably would appear as flat, but it will be sloped to some degree. But we still have to drive a regular car, so it can't have a drop-off or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. What are some of the alternatives? You said that this was the best of the alternatives. What else other than some of the other non-construction related activities, what else has been considered? Like going up, going down?
Sure, good question. I think I'll ask Mr. Frederick to answer that. He's the one that's been living this for the year and a half, and he's explored probably more options than I'm even aware of. Yes.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Frederick.
Good morning, everyone. Mayor, City Council,
Thanks for
staff,
being
thank
here.
you for having me. I want to make sure I understood your question, but I'm just going to go through maybe like the whole timeline. We realized pretty quickly that the type of restaurant that we had, we didn't have enough parking. This is my fault. At being an Edina resident, I had most of our restaurants downtown, where valet is just kind of normal. That's just kind of what you do. So I'm like, 30 spots sounds great. Well, on a Friday or Saturday night, we've clocked almost every night that 40% of our restaurant is full when our whole parking lot is full. Like, we are not being able to maximize our restaurant. I'm super optimistic that if we can get more parking, then we can have more sales, hire more staff, keep more staff. But to your question specifically, We've tried valet. The residents did not like that. They thought we were too fancy of a restaurant, so we removed the valet portion. Tried parking on Wilson and some other streets, and then there was some issues with the neighborhood that they didn't like all the parking over there. Also, our customers didn't like it because it was too far for them to walk. I think City Hall is kind of allowed, but we don't advertise that. We don't tell anyone. So some people do, but even that is a tough walk. And you guys would know if you ever walk over for lunch. It's not a bad walk, but I think people in the suburbs and maybe specifically Edina want to be able to park right out in front. That's been a big thing we've been hearing. We've also tried to negotiate some space in the building just south of us. I forget what the name of the building is, but being able to have that as overflow, create a little walkway up to the parking lot, they have been extremely difficult to work with, to negotiate. We've tried 3 or 4 different times. The broker is basically stop talking to us because we keep on trying to negotiate. The amount that they're asking for is just not feasible, like nowhere in the ballpark of being feasible for our restaurant to afford. And to be specific, they want $1,000 per stall per month. And when we were thinking they have like hundreds of spaces that are open, and we're like, we'll give you $1,000 for like 20. How about that? And they're just like laughing at us, and they've basically discontinued talk. So we have tried, but as far as like if you're asking what are other options on construction here, we've worked with a group called Laux. It's a civil engineer and a contractor to really kind of come up with the best option. I'm not sure of another option because we don't want to go up. That wouldn't make sense. So this is the best option. There could be a variation, I think, but it is sloped like Bill was saying. It's already sloped right now. We would just match that slope, just kind of right next door to it. And it would be more of you can go down and circulate or tandem, in front. So more work to be done, but looking to continue the work, basically. So
One of the other options that we did look at very early on was to see if we could utilize the indoor parking that's for the resident. And I know there were several conversations with the owner, and they just felt that was just not an option.
there's some security issues, I think they cited, and I understand that. So.
Yep, so those are the options we've looked at so far.
Thank you. And last question, then I'll hand it over to others. What is the best case scenario and timeline?
Well, I think because of the spark timing, my contractor said we need to move fairly fast to get it done this year. They think they can do it as long as they can start submitting for permit and we start the entitlement process. But I think we'd like to have it done by the end of the year. That's the goal.
Okay. And then I'll also look to Mr. Neuendorf, because I know our processes are not always rapid. And so if there's additional meetings, right, it looks like city council, other things that they'll have to be brought through. Do you have any concerns, even if we started immediately, with hitting kind of an end of year timeline, given our spark constraints?
Yeah. If the site plan approval is secured, and if the contractor works diligently, barring anything crazy like great recessions and lack of asphalt or lack of materials, they can definitely get it done. If the entitlement process lags, I think we would expect 60, 90 days at the most. We are structured, the city staff is structured in a way where we can do more than one thing at a time. So we cannot issue the permit before the entitlement is secured, but we can certainly review the plans and have it go through that internal process to expedite construction. But all parties would have to work diligently at this point. But it's, the good news, it's May. The construction season will go until November. There's plenty of time. And, even getting the restaurant open, Mr. Frederick has demonstrated his ability to push his contractor and get things done on his timeline.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just to follow up on that question, if we allocate the funds and then the project does not close in time by the end of the year, what's the impact of the financing construct that you've shared for the city?
Sure. If the funding is approved by the HRA, but the contract doesn't finish, the owner is at risk, right? So if they don't finish until January 1st,
Yeah.
we cannot provide funding. So the owner is at risk for that. At this point, I don't have another big project that's queued up that would be, there's no opportunity cost at this point. We're not holding it back from someone else, but the risk is borne by the owner, not by the city.
Can you put the financing construct slide back up? And I'm just trying to be crystal clear. If we don't finish on time, the total dollar amount that the owner is responsible for is how much?
Right now, we're estimating $750,000 to build it. And if things get delayed and the contractor can't start until 2027, I would expect that the owner would not move forward.
Okay. So that's how you're thinking of, you have a sense of how long this will take. You're going to line things up, get permits approved, all of that. But if you at some point think you're not going to be able to finish, then we would just scrap the whole thing.
Project has to be completed to be eligible for the Spark funds.
Correct. Yeah, to be eligible, the work has to be finished.
It has to be finished.
And the contractor has to be paid. So the way the state law was written, the Spark monies not only have to be pledged and allocated, they need to be out the door to the contractor's checking account.
Yeah.
So the commissioner's point, the adjusters would get $200,000 from the property owner. The rest of it would be on him.
Correct.
And so I think that's important for Mr. Frederickson to understand. I think we've done this a number of times for restaurants in Edina. Very little risk to us. The funds are available, but it's a huge risk for a small business owner, given the timing constraints. And I don't know what we can do to accelerate that, but I just think it's fair to make sure that that's crystal clear, especially in this case for sure, but anybody else this year who wants to try to utilize those funds. My other two questions, I think you talked about, when I looked at this, I actually wasn't thinking about job creation. And so that was going to be my second question. How is this creating jobs? And so you alluded to it a little bit, but if you want to speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah. So I think that, we know kind of what our staff level was like right away when everyone was really excited about it. Everyone's coming down, everyone's parking wherever. And I would say we were maybe not double the sales like the first year before like construction on City Hall started and construction on the bridge started. But I'd say we were close to maybe about 60% more busy and more full as far as our tables go. And back to the comment on a Friday or Saturday night when the parking lot is full and the Cahill School, the Grange area, all those spots are taken up. we're only about 40% capacity. That can be easily equated with the staffing level as well. So if we have another 50 to 60% that we can fill, that is more staff members as well. So, and more consistency. When things are busy and staff can't make money, they look for other jobs. Mm-hmm. They have a choice. I don't force them to work for us. If they're not making money, they go somewhere else. So it's also about keeping the great staff that we have, and we do love our staff. So
Thank you. And then the last question, Mr. Neuendorf, the public use of the parking lot, this expansion, can you describe, is that how public use will be kind of defined, I guess? Maybe I'll leave it that way.
Sure. Whenever we use tax increment financing, access to available parking is something we always push for. It just, in a suburban location, it just is one of those public goods we can achieve. So the city holds a permanent public easement on the parking lot. Whether there's 28 stalls in it or whether there's 58 stalls in it, we own that, we hold that with a couple conditions. The property owner, through the tenant, can determine when they don't need it. They get first priority. But at times, if they're not open on Sundays or they don't open till noon, those times that it's free, it's available for public use. And the owner and tenant can also set rules. So for example, they can say no overnight parking, or there's a 4-hour time limit. We don't want to create conditions where someone parks there, goes to the airport, and goes to Florida for a month and a half. So they always have rights to set those rules. But the city does have review. If they make an unreasonable rule, no parking for more than 3 minutes and only on Saturday mornings, we can say that's unreasonable, that's not the intention. So we have that permanent access right with some limitations.
Okay, thank you.
can I follow up on that real quick? Something that Bill and I did talk about was we're closed all locations for July 4th. We give the staff that off. So having the parking lot for any type of staging for the parade or people to park might be a good option too. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about the parade. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, good morning.
Morning.
Golly, there's so much to think about. I want to dig down a little bit more about the neighbor complaints on Wilson Road and the balance between the neighbor complaints and then the staff and diners. How difficult was it for your enterprise, whether it's customers or your employees, to use Wilson Road for parking?
Yeah, it was difficult, and I want to be fair, but I also want to let you guys know what we went through. We had staff and customers parking on Wilson on both sides, which was allowed, but I don't think that there was ever a reason to park there. So when we started doing it, it was clear that maybe there's much of a bottleneck, and I think people maybe traveling through didn't like that. I know that our staff, they were getting parking tickets, or there were, if their tabs have been expired, they're getting little love letters from maybe the local police. But it definitely ruffled some feathers that we were new and things were busy, and this area that hadn't been busy before was now very vibrant. Yeah. So I think we figured that out. We all know where to park now. I think that part has been kind of past us, so we feel good about where we're at right now. Our staff does park on Wilson because the 28 spots are very sacred, and it does fill up, and it'll fill up during a weekday night too. It'll fill up on a Sunday brunch. So it always looks busy, which is great, but the problem is that our fault. We built a restaurant, not necessarily not for families, but the design, the menu indicates kind of a couple's night out or meet a business lunch or friends. And so everyone is driving independently and separately. That's really our big issue. When a family of 5 wants to go out, they're going to drive in one car, So the mathematical equation here is just not working for us. And And I would say that the same as, Hilltop has a problem with parking too. They've got 40 stalls and their people are busting out on the streets, and they have a next door neighbor that they can probably work with. We don't have that right now, so.
Yeah. So I guess the point I'm getting to is we're talking about $750,000 because the neighbor is unreasonable and because the neighborhood doesn't like parking on the street. And what I want to do is putting my regulatory hat on, right, which I'm not supposed to do, but pretending I'm thinking about what the city council will do. This is going to be an area, especially when we build a municipal campus, it's going to have tons of parking. And it just seems so inefficient. We've got that big parking lot to the south. There's street parking. There's parking at City Hall. There's going to be parking at the municipal campus there. And so we've got this little window of time for a very expensive project that's going to have some environmental problems just because you got to change the dirt and take away trees and handle the water. I mean, it's a big, complicated project. And it just feels inefficient. And I think, the bottom line for me is we asked the building owner to put a restaurant in there. You put a restaurant in there. It's wildly successful as far as the reviews go. And people go there and they have a great time and they get really good food. And so we want you to thrive. But I'm looking at our values that we have to make all our decisions of: stewardship, sustainability, equity, health in all matters, and community input. And it just, in the end, I would support this because it is a good use of the spark funds. It's creating new jobs. That's why we have it. But it just feels so like a lot of pressure on you, a lot of inefficiencies in parking, and golly, I wish there was a better way to do this. I wish the municipal campus we could just put the parking lot in right there and they could walk just from Tupa Park, right? That's a much safer walk than from City Hall, but that's not going to happen by the end of the year. So those are my thoughts. Like I said, I think this is a good use of the spark funds to create jobs and something permanent and something that will have public purpose. Another thing that I was thinking about is one of the most poignant comments against this project when we approved it was that people would come from football games up to the Perkins. And, I think it's 4 Fridays a month, and if you're looking more for families to come to the restaurant, I think that would be really neat for those teenagers to be able to walk up from the football field, come at 9 o'clock when the restaurant's maybe dwindling out with the peak, and have a treat after the game and to join there. So I think there's definitely a public purpose to doing this. I think it's in line with how we've used the spark funds, but I'm just, my regulatory hat is very unhappy that we're going to have some inefficiencies with parking due to just the site and the time limits. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Commissioner Risser.
Thank you, and I do appreciate Commissioner Jackson's points. For me, this is a real tough ask, especially when I look at the hours that you're open. And this is not a case where we have a restaurant that's closed on Sundays. Monday through Thursday, 11 to 9, Friday, 11 to 10, Saturday, 10 to 10, Sunday, 10 to 10. So there really isn't much opportunity for the public to use that parking. The other point is, yes, you could say this is a good use of spark money, but I really think in terms of the overall budget and really thinking about who's benefiting, who's paying, when we're taking these funds, and I know if they're not spent, they're going to go back to the TIF district from whence they came. However, it would be, in my view, better stewardship to return the remaining 1 million of spark back to the county to be redistributed. And I say this because we have a backlog of repair that we need to do, maintenance. We also, and this is a project that I know I'm never going to see as a commissioner get launched and built, but will maybe get launched a little bit. Maybe in 5, 10 years, we'll have an actual park building for Lewis Park. And the building that's there is very inadequate. It's located next to affordable housing that is in a area where heat is a particular problem during the summer. They don't have HVAC. It's very basic. And so I feel for the situation that you're in. However, when I look at other projects and I really think about being prudent stewardship, all those things that Commissioner Jackson just raised, my regulatory hat is really pinching my head as I read this too. And so I do not think that I can support this. I was also thinking that, maybe not everybody is so opposed to taking a walk before and after their meal. And if there was some way you could reward people who parked in the Jerry's parking, or the municipal ramp next to Jerry's, and used that Grandview pedestrian bridge and took a little stroll over to the restaurant before and after. It's a great way to work up that appetite and then also kind of get a little more comfortable before you get into your car. That was a thought that I had. But I think about what parking was available to the public when Perkins was here. And that was a very different era, though, because there were council meetings that were super packed. We've had that a couple times, but not the way we used to in the past. But I parked frequently over in the Perkins lot and came on over. So that particular, and I don't think they got any public money or benefit. Did Perkins get anything from us?
I'm not aware.
Okay, and then the other thing is, when I look at the financing strategy, it's approximately 200, and I know this is rough, but it's a firm commitment from the city for, and we're talking 400,000, right? 200,000, okay. But it's approximate so those numbers might come in lower for the business owner and also for the property owner. And the property owner has benefited tremendously. Put in a seven-story market rate apartment complex on land that had a building height limitation of 4 stories for part of it and 2 stories for the other part. So they got that benefit. And then it was also a TIF district. And what was the value of that TIF district and what is the term? I can't remember.
I don't recall the value, or I don't know how you define value, but it's a 26-year district. How we arrange the revenue from the tax increment.
Okay.
65% would pay off the note to the developer. The other remaining balance, 35%, would go back to the city to pay for the roundabouts and all the road improvements.
Okay. And sorry to ask that without asking it in advance. I try not to do that. But so just looking at this and thinking, this really, to me, at this particular juncture where we are and all of the needs, and there's also so much concern about the levy, and that has knocked out projects. That meant Lewis Park didn't get their new building. So it is something I feel at this point, if we had more money, if we had more financial resources, but it's an opportunity cost that, I can't see making. So I'm sorry, but thank you.
Keeping your town appealing and economically viable is a balancing act. And I think one of the advantages of Spark is that it gave us a chance to look at little pockets of opportunity that we could lend a helping hand to make sure that there was prosperity in that business, and it affected the overall prosperity and the desirability of our town as a place, as a destination to come to, whether it was for shopping, for retail, or whether it was for restaurant activity. All these things knit together created a really interesting fabric where now on a broader sort of basis, we're the place that people want to come if you're engaged in retail, and I think we could be a place that people want to come if they want to dine out. At least another really viable option compared to, let's say, North Loop or some other places. So, and that's what we're trying to build, is that economic viability, and it comes in different ways. And for me, the use of this money for this purpose is entirely consistent with what we've done in the past to create opportunities for other businesses. whether it's an elevator for a nightclub that's just enormously successful, as I understand it, and what I expect to have happen over at Cafe Americana. And yeah, $750,000 is not an inconsequential amount of money, but what we're talking about is making a $200,000 investment on a forgivable loan basis, retaining our rights of easement and access, and then also giving them a loan that we're going to get back and over time. And to me, the only thing that's kind of hanging out there as an unknown is the owner in, is the owner in at $200,000? And I'd say that would be a condition that the owner is in too, that we'd want to look at. But for me, it meets everything that was intended with Spark. It's a job creator. And the risk for Starling, the risk for Jester, to me, is being at 40% of your capacity to operate. Continuing on that model, you fill your parking lot up with guests that want to be there, and you're still only at 40% of capacity. We want them to be as vital as they can be, like they were when they started, when it was the new shiny object. So I think this is a really good use of park funds. The engineering part of things, I mean, there's some tricky things to deal with from an environmental standpoint, but they're not that tricky. We've all picked up trash over there. Every year, or twice a year, we're picking up trash, walking right by there. You know exactly what the lay of the land is over there. They're going to figure all that out. They're going to figure out the drainage. They're going to figure out the levels of parking, whether it's completely level. So in the 750, I mean, it's like everything else now. It is what it is. In this world we're living in now, where we just spent over $45 million on a fire station, and the county is spending $140 million on a library, numbers that kind of take your breath away. But it is what it is. And so do we want to make this business, give them a chance to thrive, and with a modest investment with funds that were intended for this purpose? I'd say, yeah, why not? But let's make sure it gets done, to Commissioner Pierce's point, make sure it gets done by the end of the year. So thanks to me, I don't know, I get a sense that nobody else was maybe quite that affirmative on where they wanted to head, but I could hand back to Commissioner Agnew for her thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, and I started with a lot of questions. Obviously have a lot of thoughts. I feel like I probably have a reputation of being maybe not anti-parking, maybe that's a little strong. But I would say at the heart of it, I'm about right-sizing parking. I don't want us to overpark or have standards that just don't meet the demand. And so first, I want to just commend you for being willing to come to the table initially years ago and not overpark for what you thought you needed. And so I acknowledge, now we're in this situation, and my preference would be we could just work something out with the neighbor. And I don't know if we have any sway at the city, but $1,000 a stall per month, that's just unreasonable. And so that's maybe just one ask. I don't know if we have any capability there. Assuming that we don't, and we couldn't make something like that work, I am supportive of this. I really, truly want you all to be successful and appreciate the investment that you've made into the community. Ideally, we wouldn't have to do it, right? And I think others are kind of along those same thoughts. It would be great if we could just share parking across the general area. And I really wish that we could. And so I would say that that's probably just a disappointment. But I don't know what our timeline looks like for the Civic Campus either. And I also hear the concerns with people walking across the street. It's a little bit further than that. But so I would say generally I am supportive of it, and will be a part of the conversation moving forward. So thank you.
Mr. Pierce. Commissioner Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with everything that's been said. The only thing I'll add to maybe the mayor's comments, I'm not sure if this is the intent behind the use of the funds, how we would choose to invest in one project versus the other. So that kind of makes me feel a little uneasy if we were just to pick this one and say, well, we're not going to fund this one for, but it's using the funds for the exact same purpose as others that we've done. So I hadn't thought too deeply about that, but yeah, I don't know how I would answer why did we choose not to support this business versus another. And so I agree with what the mayor said. It's the purpose of the funds. I actually also agree with Member Risser. I would have wanted to return all of the funds when we voted back in October. But as a council, we decided not to do that. And I'm glad that we didn't. And so here's an opportunity that we can still leverage those funds. And I'm happy to engage in that. The only concern I have is you got to be really sure that you can finish, because if you start and we miss the timeline, you're on the hook for it all. So that's the only, I just want to make sure from a timeline that you're comfortable with how things are progressing.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Risser has already made her view known, and Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, so I would be in favor of this. You know, my environmentalist hat is looking at a lot of pavement, you know, where there are trees now. And I would even say I'd throw in a little bit more money for solar panels for shade for people, or some islands for trees, because, like I said, that looks like a lot of pavement as I look at the picture in big. So I'm in favor of this, and I think it's a good use of spark funds. I just want to make the point, too, that had we put it back into the TIF things, it may shave 6 months, a year off of when those TIF districts would close. It wouldn't build the Lewis Park shelter. It wouldn't build anything else. This is going to create jobs in our community. I love having the restaurant there. I think, you know, having it being a thriving, interesting place to go is to the benefit, as the mayor said, to our economy, to our city, to the vibrancy of it. And you know, like I said, taking it from 2035 to 2033 at max on a TIF district elsewhere just doesn't have the immediate benefit that this would have. So I'm in favor of it. And like I said, if you can fit a few islands for trees in there or something, I'd be even more in favor of it. So there you go.
I think it's a good point on the trees. It strikes me that we ought to be able to create a buffer along the entrance ramp off 100,
Yeah.
you know, at whatever level that parking is. So we're going to shift the trees over that we planted. Anyway, yes, Commissioner.
One last question. I'm not expecting an answer now, but I'd be curious to know what it would cost to have like a couple of like level 2 charging stations there as well. So maybe it's something to come back to us with. Thank you.
We can look into that for sure.
Okay. Commissioner Risser.
I do want to underscore we're making an investment because people, very high level, and I know there's all these other factors involved, but who are driving separately to your locale. And so in the context, you know, I'm thinking back about that heat map that we saw presented to us at our April meeting and talking about Earth Day, and really thinking about how this whole situation is problematic on several levels. And so we are moving forward to fix a problem which will make it possible for people to continue to drive their cars individually to your restaurant. And so I just wanted to get that out there. And I don't know, just if there could be more brainstorming on how to encourage people to get there, walking, biking, public transit. You know, I know things have been scaled back quite a bit in terms of public transit, but reaching out to other groups too. I know there's a lot of senior residences where they can rent a van and they can go to different places. And I don't know if you've thought about reaching out to those groups, you know, because that could be a fun night out. So building business in a way that takes available transportation infrastructure and resources into account. Thank you.
All right, I think you've got some direction here.
Yes, that's super helpful. Thank you. So we'll continue on the journey and come back to you in probably a few months, and there'll be a lot of work that happens between now and then. So thank you for the direction, and we'll keep moving.
Okay, yeah, thanks for being here, Mr. Frederick. It was helpful to have you here
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
for the discussion. Yeah, thank you. And then, Mr. Nundorf, you want to continue on?
Yes, thank you. The last item this morning is an update on our Centennial Lakes TIF district. Recently, the city council had conversations about using some of the monies in that TIF district. And we're at the point where the monies that were available have been committed. So I thought it'd be a good time to remind ourselves what we've done with this district. So this was an interesting one. This is one of the earliest TIF districts in Edina. And the city and the HRA made intentional decisions to use those the funds that were available strategically, not only to transform the old mining operation into what it is today with the retail and the office and the medical and the park and the residential, but the TIF laws that were in place at the time gave the city and the HRA more flexibility then than we have today. And so the city, again, made intentional and strategic decisions to use those monies in particular purposes. So that TIF district decertified more than 12 years ago. And so it's been, fully on the tax rolls, all those good things. But the laws that were in place allowed the HRA an option to either retain the monies that were sitting in that account. Alternative, we could have given them back to the county. We chose to keep them here in Edina to invest in Edina, as opposed to some other city or some other county. And in the last dozen years, we've made many, many improvements, most of which we were thinking occurred before you took office. And so we wanted to take a few moments just to remind ourselves what we've accomplished and why we chose those routes. And we thought this is the good time to do this because with the recent conversation about the funding of the highway and the pedestrian bridges, the monies are tapped out for now. So a quick background, we had the 300 acres of mining operations, the old Hedberg gravel and sand pit on France Avenue. It was there for decades, right? That's what Edina was. It was prairie and a turkey farm and gravel pits and a dump. We had the dump as well. A lot has changed over the last 40 years. And again, it wasn't easy. There was hard decisions and hard conversations. The city chose to use tax increment financing to support the construction of the roads, the park, the trails, the utilities. It was a gravel pit with nothing. That TIF district was established in 1988, and it decertified 26 years later in 2014. Over that time, we saw the tax base in that area grow from about $260,000 to more than $3.6 million. So a huge growth in the tax base, which is what we use TIF for here in Edina. By comparison, citywide, over that same period of time, the citywide tax base increased by 16%. So again, TIF is used in a targeted, strategic manner to really make a transformative improvement to the community. And in 2014, when the TIF district decertified, the laws that were in place allowed us to look at the existing balance of $11.5 million and choose, do we want to give that to the county? And some of it would have come back to the city. Or do we want to keep it here for the city and make public improvements? And that's what we chose to do. So with tax increment financing, there's always rules, there's regulations, there's limitations. They change, they get tweaked every year at the state legislature, and then some are just pretty fundamental. So with this $11 million balance that we had, there was a number of items that were clearly eligible, and then there's some that just clearly are not. So we could have used those monies for public improvements, roads, utilities, sewer, sidewalks, lights, those types of things. We could use that to acquire land, for demolition, for environmental cleanup, for affordable housing, for a variety of redevelopment studies to push redevelopment and explore that, different options, and also for some staff internal administrative expenses. And each of those types of expenditures could be used in a way that the $11 million was available to us without increasing the levy. And I think that was one of the critical talking points back, 10, 20 years ago. We could make these improvements without raising the levy on the typical taxpayer because these TIF districts were creating so much revenue. State law is also very clear that tax increment dollars cannot just be used for regular repairs. We can't just clean the street or put a new window. We can't use it to buy police squads or fire trucks or that type of equipment. We cannot use it to build a city hall or a fire station, and we can't use it to build a park or a park shelter or things like that. It's just one of those fundamental rules of TIF.
I like the way you, on that prior slide, the way you characterized the use of the word ineligible. I've never seen it in this sort of a, with a gap in between N and E.
Yeah, I don't know if my grammar teacher would have liked that, but that's how it ended up.
It kind of makes it more pronounced and understandable in a way, than the conventional spelling. Anyway.
So the state statutes not only guide how we can spend the money and how we cannot spend the money, it also is guided by where we can invest those dollars. So this map shows 3 different areas. The blue area in the bottom right-hand corner is the Centennial Lakes TIF boundary. So that includes the office park on France Avenue. It includes the retail center, the Hughes Pavilion, and it includes the building where Pinstripes and Container Store and the medical office. The rest of the properties around it were actually in a different TIF district. Those were in Edinburgh TIF district. And then over the years, again, state law changes from time to time. The city keeps an eye open and looks at opportunities when they exist. The green line is the boundary, the final boundary, where these TIF dollars can be expended. Initially, they could be expended only in the blue area or, across the street, like very close to it. But over time, we modified those boundaries to make sure that once we had an asset, a pool of assets, we could invest them more strategically. So over the last dozen years, we made investments throughout the greater Southdale area on local roads, on county roads, over state highways. We also made many investments at 50th and France and at Grandview. So each one of these red dots signifies a project or a combination of projects and where they occurred. Now, you'll note most of these improvements happen in commercial areas. That's where we have frankly, the more expensive projects and the ones that are more complicated because you're building it under pressure of traffic and you've got constrained site limits. We can't always stray onto private property. We only have so much space. So that's where we invested it. And we made, I prepared this presentation breaking it into 3 categories. So we funded some studies with these monies. Again, rather than raising the levy or drawing from a different budget, we use these funds to really look at different investment options. We created years ago a district-wide traffic model for the greater Southdale area. When we were first seeing lots of projects back 2014, 2015, we noted that the requirement is to look at traffic at that project site. And the questions that kept coming up was, what happens downstream? What happens upstream? It all factors in. So we use these TIF dollars to have an engineering firm create a traffic model where they can plug that in and look all throughout the area.
Bill?
Yes.
So I want to dig down deeper on that because we get that question a lot. And I know of one resident who is always like, we have to look at beyond the thing. So when we do a traffic study or when Tehar, what's the name of our traffic study firm though?
Ed Tehar is one of the
Tehar.
consultants.
Okay.
Yeah, we use a couple different ones,
Okay.
but it's all the same model.
Okay, and when they do a traffic study, do they dig into this? And is it regularly updated as because there's, this persistent concern that we're only looking at it spot-wise and not district-wise?
Yeah, it is updated with each new project. So I think the first one we used it on, if I recall correctly, was the 71 France, the Lunds-Byerly project. We looked at it when Southdale changed, when the Onyx and the Aria and the Millennium went in. And each time that something gets added, a project gets finished and complete, we add that to the model. So more recently, when we looked at the enclave proposal for the Macy's furniture site, we looked at it with the knowledge that all these other changes had happened as far up as Highway 62 and as far south as 494. So that is something that we use on a regular basis. And that's possible because we have these monies available to create that system.
Thank you.
We also conducted 2 studies looking at the promenade. So when the TIF district was still active, the construction and improvements to the promenade were funded with TIF. And after the TIF district was decertified, we continued to explore different ways to extend that promenade. We looked at different options going to the north, and then more recently, we looked at options going to the west. So a lot of different studies that we could look at to really make long-term planning decisions for the community. I think most importantly, though, we funded a number of public improvements. I decided not to include pictures because you can only look at so many pictures of sewers and sidewalks and curbs before they get boring. And I will go through each one of these quickly. But the city council and the HRA in place at the time, so some of your predecessors, looked at this funding source as a way to finish projects, to go from a B project to an A project without raising the levy. And I think that was one of the most critical decisions that was made. So we extended the promenade. We constructed phase 4 when the 71 France apartments were built. There was an opportunity. The neighbor was doing something big. We could build off of that, and we made the phase 4 improvement to the promenade. We also made an improvement to the west promenade in response to the 4040 flats, the senior affordable housing building. The neighbors were concerned. They wanted some separation. They wanted a path. They wanted like a big fence and sound wall. The city didn't have that in our CIP. We didn't have that in our budget. But with these funds, we could deliver that public improvement in response to that project to help that neighborhood. We also, one of the first projects we did was also the pedestrian intersection improvements. So these were the ones back, 12, 14 years ago at this point. We made the intersection improvements at 66th, at 70th and 76th, and we had the audacity to paint crosswalks across an 8-lane road and put little buttons for pedestrians. It was a big deal at the time. We also used these funds to fill in many patches of missing sidewalks in that greater Southdale area. Many of the sidewalks would be on one side of France, but not on the other. Or they'd be on one block, and then I recall you'd get to the Galleria block, and there was no sidewalk. You were just stuck. So we use these funds to patch in those missing gaps. Again, not easy projects. You're working under traffic with constrained sight lines, and you've got utilities to work around, and having these funds allowed us to get that work done without impacting the property tax levy. Also in response to a lot of the work at the Lunds and Byerlys at 70, at Hazelton and 72nd, we completely rebuilt Hazelton Road. added the roundabouts rather than hard intersections, added sidewalks connected to the promenade. The neighbors and the county had concern about that France Ave, or about the Lunds and Byerlys and access onto 72nd Street. So we wanted to keep access for the neighbors, so we used these funds to construct that dedicated left turn lane. Again, not glamorous and sexy, but if you live in that neighborhood, it's nice to be able to turn left to get into your neighborhood. At 66th and York, so the other side of the mall, back in the day, it was the old Best Buy on that corner. And over time, we worked with 3 different developers. We negotiated that they would each rebuild their respective corners of that intersection. But then you had the 4th corner that wasn't being redeveloped, so we used these monies so we could finish that intersection. And again, we did those audacious things about adding crosswalks and sidewalks where none existed before. They were parking lots. We also constructed a monument sign at that intersection to recognize that you were in Edina limits. And then a few big projects were down at 50th and France. We acquired property, 2 properties at 50th and France. We had heard, again, back to our earlier conversation, a lot of demand that there's not enough parking at 50th, and it's not convenient enough, and that building's old, and there's no elevator. So when there was strategic opportunities, when a business closed, when an owner was retiring, the city stepped in and purchased that land. We could do that because we had funds available. We did not have to raise the levy. We demolished the old buildings. Unfortunately, we found much more dry cleaning fluid in the soil than we ever expected, and we had funds to cover that and to pay for it and keep moving forward without raising the levy. And then we built the North Parking Garage. That was a $12 million project. We used TIF for part of it, and then we had we sold some land for the rest. But we could build that with 0 increase to the tax levy. And we made some other improvements at the South Parking Garage, some major structural improvements to really extend the life. And we added some bike lanes elsewhere as well. So a lot of projects. My point of this, though, is we could do that because we had these assets available. We strategically decided not to give them back to the county, who was not going to fund any of these projects, and we kept the monies here for our own community-wide improvements. More recently, we have 3 projects underway that we expect to use the balance of these funds. So right now, we're doing a very small study looking at opportunities to create entryway signage right by City Hall, by the highway. The bridge is almost finished. It's a great opportunity to have a monument sign that lets people know, hey, you're in Edina. So that we're doing a little study to see what that might look like and what those costs might look like. But I think more fundamentally, we finished the large bridge over France and Vernon. That turned out to be more expensive than we were anticipating. We could tap into the Centennial Lakes Fund, and we transferred $1.5 million. Rather than increasing the levy more, we could use those funds. And it looks like we're going to do the same thing with the pedestrian bridge over Roslyn Park. To get the bridge that is desirable there, we can tap into these remaining funds to get us over the line and satisfy our budget constraints, again, without having to raise the levy more.
On that latter issue, I think Manager Neal mentioned to me the other day that we are in the process of getting some additional funding from MnDOT for the pedestrian bridge.
Yeah, I don't know if Bill, if you was in that loop or not, but I did talk to Director Milner about that, and he said they're getting pretty close to having that finalized.
We know what the range of potential
I think
additional
it was in the range
contribution
of 200,000, something like that.
is. Okay, that all helps.
If it were easy, it would have been done decades ago, right? All these big projects are so difficult. So as the city moved forward with a lot of these public improvements, one of the things we heard from your predecessors was how valuable it was to have this pool of funds available when unexpected situations arise. It's nice to be able to have a savings bank, so to speak, to draw from rather than just always relying on a levy increase. And so we had an eye towards replenishing this fund. Now the TIF district is over, right? We're not collecting TIF from this district, But when we use these funds, for 3 of the projects, we structured them as internal intra-fund loans, which means that over time, there's a good chance that we will pay ourselves back. So when we built the parking garage at 50th and France, we pulled about $6 million from the Centennial Lakes TIF, and we structured $4.1 million of that as an intra-fund loan. So as that TIF district at 50th continues to grow and meet what it was expected to do, we can repay ourselves. And so at some point, and this is 10, 15 years down the road, so don't get your hopes up for next year, but over time, we hope to replenish those accounts slowly so that a future city council for a future generation will have another pool of funds to use. The way the laws were written back in the day for these funds give us a lot of flexibility, right? Any type of public improvement is basically eligible. So we structured the 50th and France loan that way. The $1.5 million for the bridge right by City Hall here, we structured that as an interfund loan going to the Eden Wilson, to the Mason Green project. So we expect to be able to pay off the TIF note to that developer for the Mason Green very early. I mean, that's generating a huge tax bump. They went from paying $100,000 a year to over $1 million a year in property taxes. So that will repay their note pretty quickly. And we think we can then use some of those tax increment dollars to pay ourselves back, again, to replenish this pool for a different generation. And we did the same thing, but to a smaller degree in Grandview. When we expanded those roads on Eden, when we redid the intersection, when we built the pedestrian bridge, we can repay part of that back as well. So we're looking at the present, we're looking at opportunities and situations where we can create public improvement, but also with an eye to the future so that there's this opportunity for funding again. And of course, with every expenditure we bring, in the future, we'll bring it back to the city council. At the time, we'll have very similar conversations to what we're having this morning. Should we keep it? Should we spend it? Should we give it away? That's a conversation for a future day. So in conclusion, the decisions we made with this particular TIF district fund were intended to be a strategic use of TIF to really make improvements in Edina as opposed to out of Edina. We took advantage of the flexibility that was available to us in state law, and we did that to the degree that we are currently out of funds. So I just want to make that point very, very clear, because we've always used this as a buffer in case something happens. That buffer is now expended for the next 10 plus years until we replenish it. So I just wanted to give you the update. Staff has been keeping an eye on this for years. Some of you who've been on the council longer have been aware of it, but a lot of this happened before you were seated. So I just wanted to let you know how we use this and why we used it in that manner.
Yeah, thanks.
And that's what I have this morning.
Yeah, thanks for that report. Some folks may have some comments or some questions for you. I had one, you talked about the increase in tax capacity in the Centennial Lakes TIF district going from approximately 270,000 to 3,600,000. Those are approximate numbers. Do you know what the market value of the property changes were over that period of time too?
Not off the top of my head, but they were similar. I mean, again, it
I'm
went
sure
from
it was a dramatic increase. It'd be kind
Right.
of nice. I'd like to know that at some point in time. No hurry.
I can pull that up. I think it was I believe I did that in the HRA year in review 1 or 2 years ago. I had a slide from an old presentation. I'll dig that up for you.
Okay, thanks. Questions, comments from commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an ambitious ask, so if you say no, it's okay. But as you were talking about at the beginning about Centennial Lakes, I remember when we did that presentation about how Centennial Lakes was developed. And I remember, I don't think this was part of the public discussion, but the look of just despair on these gentlemen's faces when they talked about what happened to the real estate market in the early 90s. And so here they are going gangbusters, they're doing this great thing, and suddenly, boom, the bottom fell out of the real estate market. And there had to be some really quick dancing to complete the project. I would be interested to see a chart. So often in financial charts, you'll see a gray area where there's a recession, right? So going back to when Centennial Lakes TIF was created, a chart that showed dollars spent, maybe bars of dollars spent on TIF in our city, a line chart of interest rates. So, are they 0? Are they 7%? And then the gray areas where there's a recession. Because to me, I'm just kind of thinking, okay, we've depleted this, we've done all these great things, but a lot of this really stemmed from the Great Recession in 2008, and just everything stopped. And then slowly it picked back up, but interest rates were close to 0 for a very long time to try and stimulate things. Now we're in a period where interest rates are very high, and that is a different need for monies. But I'd kind of like to see our spending in TIF, and maybe even not even for projects, but for public improvements, using the Centennial Lakes, but maybe other TIF funding, compared to those sort of external factors, because that would help me in the future make decisions about this. So like I said, it's ambitious. If you can't do it, if finance doesn't want to spend their time because they're busy handling taxpayer issues, I understand that. But for me, that would be helpful in future decisions.
I'll look into it and see what's available. To be honest, a lot of the detail from 1988 is no longer available, but we'll see what's available and get back to you on that.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Verser.
Thank you for the presentation. I would really like to see just a complete chart with all of the expenses that have come out of the Centennial Lakes District. Is that readily available? Including, because I know that was what finance studies for the tunnel and all of that. So just from its inception and then when it started develop, even ones that weren't road infrastructure.
That is not readily available. We could probably we could probably look at spending for the last 12 years since we decertified. That's probably with enough digging and maybe an intern, we can get that. But to go back to the beginning, to 1988, that's a level of forensic accounting. I don't know if that's even available yet, let alone readily available.
Thank you. I might start digging around on edina.gov. Thank you.
Yeah, just a comment from me too. I think, what state law made possible here, and that being the ability to make public investments with these retained TIF funds without having to have a tax levy to make all of these improvements is just a pretty remarkable situation. And it's really, you can see the benefit of it over time. And you can talk about tax capacity, but I think it's also nice to look at the level of investment that businesses were willing to make because of the public improvements that preceded the private development that occurred around those public improvements, which is, always a sort of a fundamental strategy that build it and they'll come, which we've seen particularly around Centennial Lakes itself, I think, and in that district. So thanks for that information. Anybody else? Okay, good. We're right at the magic hour here of 9 o'clock. We should switch over to our executive director to see if he has any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one. I think you may have seen the news last night that there seems to be a tax bill deal with the legislature, and we don't know, really mostly around HCMC funding. We're trying to get a better picture about whether sales tax, the various sales tax proposals, not just ours, but in other cities, are part of an overall tax deal. We'll certainly know that by early next week, but we could know it later this week too. So I'm keeping an eye on that. I'll share the news with you when I know it.
All right, very good.
Thanks, that's all I have.
Anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Agnew. They've been our big movers today, that tandem, that duo, to adjourn the meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority for the City of Edina this Thursday, May 14th, 2026 at 8:59 a.m. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.